White House visit was conditioned upon whether he investigated the 2016 election. And finally, we're going to hear from Tim Morrison as well, Senior Director for Europe and Russia at the National Security Council. He, too, is on that call. And as you know, he is the one individual that didn't view the president's actions as illegal or inappropriate. A lot to talk about today with 4 separate hearings.
4 important witnesses, and we could go up to possibly 8 o'clock tonight, I've been told. So we'll see how long you're standing by outside, Kira, for us today. I do want to talk about a little more about Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, because we have talked about how the president has attacked witnesses. He's already attacked Jennifer Williams, who'll be testifying today, calling her a never Trumper. But Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, I'm sort of struck by his life story. He's from Ukraine. His family flees the Soviet Union. He grows up here in America. He and his twin brother then join the military. He then goes into public service working in the government. And I bring up his life story because when you have families that flee places like the Soviet Union, like Ukraine, they're leaving not only oppression there, they're also leaving corruption behind. So you have a man who, for his life service so far, has dedicated it to the United States, is on this phone call, and he is so struck by what he hears the president say, especially bringing up the term Burisma, the company that Hunter Biden worked for, the Ukrainian natural gas company. Now, that's a term that was not in the official transcript. And he goes back and he raises a red flag and says, listen, this is not in the official transcript. He was also sort of didn't like the tone of the conversation. He conferred with his brother, who also works in the National Security Council, and then decides to raise a red flag, Kira.
Or can I say, I mean, you just laid out why everyone is so interested in hearing him speak publicly. Everything that you just mentioned, his background, his military background, the relationship with his brother, his concerns. I mean, if you listen to both Dems and Republicans on both sides, they have said you couldn't get such a credible individual to testify. And also, you may remember when the president criticized him, he received so much blowback from that, Tom. I mean, Joe Dunford came out and said, I can't believe he's saying these things about this man. Even Jim Mattis came forward. I mean, key military heroes in this country defended Vindman. It's going to be powerful to hear him talk today. All right,
Kira Phillips first. Kira, thanks so much for that standby. I want to bring in now one of our special guests here to break down what we expect to hear today. Melissa Murray, she's a constitutional law professor at NYU. Melissa, my question to you, they have to build a case here. That's what Democrats are trying to do. They're trying to build the case. The first day of impeachment proceedings, of the hearings, the public hearings, the defense from Republicans was this is all hearsay. But today we have 2 witnesses who were on that July 25th call.
It's going to be very hard to refute the testimony of these 2 people who were there, and not only were there, actually thought that something highly unorthodox took place, so much so that one of them went and surfaced it to higher ups and was told to keep quiet about it. We also saw that in response to Ms. Williams' testimony, the president seemed incredibly exercised, came out against her, called her a never Trumper. This is really damning testimony. This will be high stakes stuff, and we're going to see the Democrats really hammer on this morning. And in the afternoon, we're going to see the Republicans try to undermine what was done in the morning by relying on Tim Morrison's testimony and also the testimony of Kurt Volker.
Both Williams and Vindman testified for hours. I don't know how familiar you are with the transcripts of their testimony because they were long, but do you see any key pieces of evidence, anything they said that leads to the Democrats' argument of abuse of power, of bribery, of any of the articles of impeachment they may want to bring?
So I think the Democrats are going to hammer, for Vindman at least, the fact that he thought that this was unusual, that he thought that the moving of the transcript from the ordinary server to the highly classified server was something highly unusual, meant to cover up this information, and the fact that the references to the Bidens were deleted from the rough transcript were also highly unusual. And again, that it went to the fact that other people who were in that context also recognized it was highly unusual and highly suspect and took great pains to remove it. For Williams, I think it's going to be key, the fact that she was one of the people who knew about Vice President Pence not being sent on to Ukraine for President Zelensky's May inauguration and instead being replaced by the 3 amigos, Sondland, Volker, and Rick Perry. And she'll she'll, I guess, will be pressed about that at length, and to figure out whether or not the reason why Pence was removed was to allow these three, who are really at the heart of this shadow channel of foreign policy, to have access to the new Ukrainian president.
Is it important that when Williams and Pence meet Zelensky that the investigations are not brought up? Is that sort of damning for the president as well, because there wasn't a pattern there that you could say all administration officials were on board with this?
Well, one of the things the president has said repeatedly is that his only interest here was in rooting out corruption. And you would assume that if that was the case, then the vice president would have been charged with bringing this up as well in the broader context of anti-corruption efforts. And it was clear from Ms. Williams' testimony that that was not the case.
All right, Melissa Murray, thanks so much for you. We look forward to more of your analysis as the day goes on. We appreciate that. I want to go to our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, right now. He joins us from Washington. And Pierre, one of the things I want to talk to you about is that what we learned from Vindman, from his testimony, is that Mick Mulvaney, the White House chief of staff, apparently, according to Vindman, was also on board, and there was a grand plan when it came to talking about the investigations and dealing with Ukraine.
Tom, that's a key point. Vindman places Mulvaney directly involved in the chain of command in terms of why this money was being held up and who was orchestrating it. One of the things that I'm looking for today, Tom, is also this notion that you have career staff, the people who are experts on national security policy, people who are experts on Ukraine issues. They're the people who seem to be most concerned about what was taking place, how irregular it was, this unusual channel of information that was being conducted by Rudy Giuliani, some say. And it strikes me that the more and more testimony we hear in public from these people, the whistleblower who broke this story wide open becomes less and less relevant, Tom.
Well, and you could almost argue Vindman was a whistleblower in himself, even though, he's not anonymous. He came out because he raised several red flags, correct, Pierre?
He did indeed. Now, one of the key things is that he was so concerned is that he reported this up the chain of command and wanted something done about it. And one of the key things is that he will be likely pressed on what was the response when you took your concerns? What did you hear back? Was anything done about it? How did he react when he heard about the information being placed on this super secret server, if you will, if he was privy to that information? So he's in a position to lay out in more detail both his reaction and who he spoke to within the White House about his concerns.
All right, Pierre, stand by for us. We're going to want your analysis throughout the day. It is going to be a very long day. Now, earlier today on the Hill, our Devin Dwyer caught up with a representative out there on the Intel Committee. Let's take a listen.
Congressman, it's great to see you.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you.
So 9 witnesses, 3 days, a packed week. What is it that Democrats hope to accomplish this week?
Well, I think this week we want to do two things. One, kind of lay out for the American people what we understand to be the evidence and explain why it matters. And then two, allow the American people to evaluate the witnesses for themselves. It's one thing to hear about them through deposition transcripts. It's another to see them live and to, decide for themselves whether these folks are credible or not.
You've got 4 witnesses today.
Yeah.
A couple of key players. You've got Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. He was on the National Security Staff, listened in on that phone call. And then this afternoon, Kurt Volker, Special Envoy.
Sure.
Why are those 2 men so significant in this story?
Well, Vindman was on the phone call. He was a participant in the July 25th phone call, so he has a first-hand account. Some of my colleagues on the other side like to say, oh, this person wasn't on the phone call. How would he or she know what happened? Well, it turns out Mr. Vindman was not only on the phone call, but he took notes and he helped to prepare the call transcript. And then the second person, Volker, was part of the Three Amigos, this group of Volker, Sondland, and Perry, under the direction of Giuliani and, of course, President Trump, who commandeered foreign policy in the Ukraine away from, career professionals in the diplomatic corps, people like Marie Yovanovitch, whom they fired on May 20th of this year, replaced them with their Three Amigos, and it's kind of gone off in a very bad direction, in my opinion.
So a lot of these individuals, they heard the call firsthand, but they aren't the central policymakers here. You don't have Bolton in the hot seat yet. You don't have the president himself, although he seems to have indicated maybe he's willing to come in. Do you need that to seal the deal on this case with the American people?
Well, they're welcome to come. We want to hear their testimony, and who knows, maybe the president may or may not come. But
you think that's actually a possibility?
I'm not holding my breath, given how much the president has obstructed the inquiry so far. That being said, let's just take Vindman for example. He actually worked for Bolton. So he spent a lot of time with Bolton, and he knows what happened in the national security staff. Remember, Vindman is a current member of the administration.
Still employed, right.
He's still employed. At the end of the day, after he testifies, he's going back through, I think, the White House gates to